Hello, and we are finally here. Blockchain Gaming World, episode 100. The episode I thought would never come, and sometimes thought maybe we should stop at 99. Hi, I'm your host Jon Jordan, and we are here at the 100th episode of Blockchain Gaming World. So 4 years. It's been a very rather slow pace, but we're here, and I have two fine fellas to talk about blockchain games. So before I do the introductions, I will say. This is not when I first thought about what can I do for episode 100. I sort of thought about what can I do and what sort of big names could I bring in, and then apparently the big names didn't want to come in, and then I thought let's just ignore it and let's not do anything special. And I thought no, and then from discussions I was having, as will become sort of plain, these David and Will, who I've known for a long time in the game space, and who have sort of followed this journey into blockchain games. I thought I really like them as individuals. They've worked on some great games in the past. They're into blockchain now. They have their own opinions. So let's sort of just have a slightly rambling discussion with people that I know, and they have different opinions to me. So that's why I sort of brought us together as a sort of a, and I'm going to enjoy. I know I'm going to enjoy this. I'm going to enjoy this, more than probably any other podcast. So that's why it's a good 100 for me. So that's the thinking about it in the first place. Let's do some introduction. So Will, I think I've known you for well over 10 years now. You were first doing mobile games. You were doing a mobile game for was it? It was some telecoms operator or something. It's quite a cool game. Was it Orange or something? Anyway.
Yeah.
And now you've been around the world making free to play mobile games. I guess Angry Birds 2, most famously. Now at Department of Fun, which is your company that you.
Department of Play.
Department of Play. Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh dear, hopeless. And you've we've had some interesting discussions about blockchain over the past kind of month, and you're running a really cool Discord that we can probably put a link in for people who are interested. And David as well, you've really done sort of everything in games, David, haven't you? You sort of done the big console games, and you went into mobile, and then we've been having discussions sort of for the last this year really about blockchain, and now you've founded a blockchain games company called Playmint, and you are making blockchain games. And should point out we're doing a bit of work together as well, so we won't be shilling that sort of stuff, but we had some interesting discussions. So great to have you guys here. Will, do you want to sort of kick it off a little bit in terms of I think you were probably a bit more sceptical than me and David ever were about blockchain, but now and I certainly think you're still probably sceptical about some elements of it, but what sort of changed for you to move from that skepticism into however you would sort of treat your attitude now?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't think it's as clean or as simple as like completely was skeptical and now completely not skeptical, and that there was a single thing that happened. There was I guess, like John, you've been doing this for 4 years now, right? I think back in 4 years ago, I wasn't even too sure about cryptocurrencies and was kind of dubious about whether or not that would, whether it was a bubble and these things would collapse, and they did, and then recovered. So my interest in it actually came from sort of personal finance and the sort of FIRE movement. I don't know if you know Financial Independence Retire Early, which is the idea of managing your expenses, investing, and so I kind of got interested in crypto investment there, and then started becoming interested in technology, realizing I didn't know anything about it. Then crypto games started happening, and particularly Axie Infinity, right, which is just to see the number of, and I was like, I kind of think this is bullshit, but I need to understand this stuff, and if I don't understand it, I'm going to get left behind, right, or there's going to be an interesting opportunity here. And so the more I started to dig into this and started to learn about the technologies which were underlying it, and did a deep dive deconstruction into Axie Infinity, the more I was like, okay, there's something interesting here in not necessarily the technology, but the way in which the technology changes the way that people interact or feel about the games or the items, right? And then that's kind of like layer one. And then layer two is looking at things like interoperability between games, which actually, okay, now this thing's is technology doing something that couldn't be done before, even though technically it could be, but like kind of having a permissionless system to use objects, really interesting. And then DAOs and decentralization, and then it kind of goes deep, and you start to realize actually this is not like free to play, and that this is a new business model, that this is a set of technologies, a set of ideals, and there's kind of as much philosophy as there is technology in all of this stuff. And so under the sort of down in the rabbit warren, I went into this stuff and realized actually, this stuff is interesting. This stuff is going to be revolutionary. I believe it's going to be revolutionary. It's going to change the way that we view and interact and make games. And not only is it going to change it it's going to be disruptive in a way that I think that none of us, even us in the space, really understand. And so my attraction to it feels like the early days of free to play, where you have this thing that's happening. All of a sudden, there's companies making money, and nobody really understands it. And so I quite kind of like the juicy problems to solve, but also understanding like the psychology of what's going on here, like the behavioural economics of it. And so my attraction to it is kind of like, okay, how do I deconstruct this and understand it and package it and so it makes sense for me? And then also like, where does it go next and what happens?
Yeah, I've just pulled out a little bit. So went right down the rabbit hole, as we all have, on blockchain games. Recently I pulled out and started to get my head around Web3 and composability, and I realised, man, the games part is just a small part of what Web3 is going to be. So this is really like once in a decade, maybe even longer size thing that's coming along that's going to disrupt not just games, but technology, the web, tons of things, media. It's enormous.
Yeah,
but I would agree with you, Will, though. Couldn't tell you what the end game is now, and anybody with a 3-year blockchain plan, I wouldn't trust in the slightest. I mean, who could say exactly what's going to happen in the next 3 years?
Yeah, I think it's funny because we all sort of went through that free to play mobile thing, and obviously you two were professionals making making games, and I was just sort of observing it, and I think it is funny because people who've done that we do sort of frame it in the way, it's like the early days of free to play mobile. And I was just watching a video with Gary V and Mark Zuckerberg, and they were just like, yeah, it's just about, what Gary V was going, yeah, it's just like the early days of Web 2. So I think everyone in an industry sort of plays it back to the last, whatever the last 10-year sort of disruption was. Mm-hmm. But equally, I think as you point out, Will, it is in some ways, I think in every way actually, it is much deeper in terms of it's a technology rather than a way of sort of redistributing sort of content. It's much deeper, and as you sort of point out, David, it's actually games are always good at being in the vanguard of new technology. Games tend to be something that they're clearly not boring and people spend a lot of time in them, so they're good for sort of early adoption. But this is quite a big sort of financial, technological, philosophical sort of shift, I think, in Let's not get too into humanity.
Well, how long is this podcast, John?
Because that just sounds really pompous, doesn't it? So let's just stick to the games bit. David, I'll sort of throw a question at you because you're actually, making games now. So, we've sort of discussed this a little bit over the last sort of 6 months. How's your sort of process thinking about? Because you originally were thinking about a certain type of game, and that sort of then changed rather quickly, didn't it? And
yeah.
And maybe without going into too much detail, can you talk a little bit
sure.
around that?
Yeah. So I came, a bit like Will. I was interested in crypto from an investment point of view. I love the way it worked. I liked that sort of technology, so that suited me anyway. Didn't understand how it applied to games, and I think anybody a year ago looking at blockchain games would be forgiven for saying these games don't look very good. They don't play very well because most of them didn't. So I remember peering in, and rather than seeing it as an opportunity, which I should have done, first thinking, oh, those games aren't good, which is just one way of thinking about it. Anyway, I started working with a really popular NFT artist, and he was able to, that also had a background in the games industry, he was able to show me what he was doing in the art space, and it was art that had utility, so it's sort of fringing on in that sort of interactive, interoperability, composability, and it became clearer how we could apply it into games. Now, what I immediately started doing is thinking, what was I doing last? I was making mobile free-to-play games. How can we add this to mobile free-to-play? And I did exactly the same thing 8 years ago when I started working in free-to-play, when I said, right, I make these great console games. Those people that are playing Farmville, they're playing the wrong game. Why don't you come over here and play this proper game that's really fun, people love? And I spent 2 years failing to bring people over and persuade them they're playing the wrong game. So with blockchain game, at least I did it for a shorter period of time. And so after a while, I said, actually, these aren't the games that people are playing in mobile yet. I mean, they will. But right now, the thing that's working is down the weirder end, I would say. So, and also it's the bit that we as a company don't know as well, or nobody knows that well. So rather than just spending 90% of my energy making console games or mobile games that I already know how to make, instead I've thrown us right down in the deep end, down in the weird right down the other. And we're doing a project with Loot, the Loot NFT at the moment, which I consider certainly down that end.
Absolutely. And Will, I guess when you were looking at Axie Infinity, I mean, you're sort of, as a designer and as someone who sort of looks at these games, you spend a lot of time sort of deconstructing these things. So, I mean, with the Axie thing, were you sort of surprised how sort of loose it was compared to a free-to-play sort of mobile game design, where everything I think is much sort of tighter? And has your opinion changed on that particular game, which is, I guess, for it is still the great example, and probably will continue to be for a while of a multifaceted game in which it's generating tons of money and lots of players.
I don't think so. When you say it was looser, you mean in terms of like the quality of the game or the design, or what aspects of it?
I mean, you spent a lot of time looking at the economy, didn't you? And I don't know. I mean, I'm not to put words in your mouth. I think there are some aspects of the economy that you, at certain points, didn't really feel you understood, or that in fact the designers understood. And now, do you see that now as a bug or a feature? I suppose.
I mean, yes. So there are aspects of the economy that I think are ambiguous in terms of the motivations. I need to be a bit cautious because I was talking to someone from Sky Mavis about this today, and actually kind of have a bit more insight in it now. So
secret sauce.
I think that there's maybe a little bit like, to some degree, that they call George Lucas like an accidental genius. I think that there were some aspects to this which I think were lucky in the way that they came together. But at the heart of it, it's reasonably well designed. I mean, the one thing I think that gets overlooked in all of Axie Infinity when people talk about it is because the play to earn stuff's interesting, the staking, the governance aspects of it, all interesting. But at the heart of it's actually a good game, and I think it's a game which is above average in terms of quality, but it's not yet great. It's not outstanding, but it could get there. And so that was my main takeaway from this. Was I think, like David was saying, that probably if you looked at things about a year or so ago, these games would just not be particularly great. Axie Infinity actually is there. It's already quite an enjoyable game. I play Magic and Hearthstone. I used to play Magic quite, I want to say not professionally, but I definitely played it competitively. Right, I would travel to tournaments, and so it tickles the same parts of my brain. And there's enough depth in terms of the strategy in that game that it makes it interesting. So there's two ways of looking at that, right? Which is that, okay, that's been a lot of the success of it, or actually the other way of looking at it is kind of like table stakes, right? That's what you need at the base of it. Yeah. But they've kind of built around this like an ecosystem, which is sort of part technology, so things like wallets and their own sidechain technology, as well as the aspects of the tokenomics, which are bespoke to that game and work in a certain way. And so I think it will become a blueprint for future games, but it's different. This type of game is very different from free-to-play, where we saw kind of like universal models apply. I think this is going to be a lot messier and won't ever kind of like fit into such neat packages, and the sort of like interpretation of these models and reapplication of them is going to be quite unique.
I mean, that team, Sky Mavis, whatever you look at, you take a snapshot of the game now and you can probably point out some things that don't work from a game designer point of view, or you worry how they'll scale or when new players don't arrive. Another way of looking at it is thinking of the team that they built and the experience they're getting. I can't think of anybody in the world that understands blockchain games better than Sky Mavis, so you probably place a bet on them being able to figure out some of the stuff we're describing. It's not like they're sitting there in head office and oblivious to the things that people are talking about or concerned about, so I place a bet on them being able to figure out any wrinkles that are still in the game.
I think that's fair, yeah. I mean, I guess the difference between understanding and seeing them and actually applying them is like the culture internally. I don't know enough about the culture of that team, whether or not there is that kind of like open acceptance of this criticism and being able to push it forward, or if they're like a traditional kind of like Valley startup of what we just charge ahead and ignore all criticism from the external. That I think actually was probably a lot to do with the sort of later failure of Valley startups in mobile free to play. Yeah,
I wonder whether though, because free to play had all the data available, and blockchain games has it all on chain available to like for everybody.
Yeah, right.
So it's not like I had those meetings with producers and the like when you're building a game or building a movie, when you just have that vision where we're just going to do it no matter what. But here you can see people reacting to the game. Things go up, things go down, and you can't ignore that, presumably.
You
And I
can't.
think
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, John.
I was going to say that the one interesting thing about the Sky Mavis team is they are not a traditional they're not a traditional games development company. In that sense, it's no surprise that a new sort of era comes along, and the first company to be successful is not a traditional games company. I mean, that's sort of David was alluding to. And I think the other interesting thing is they wouldn't have got to where they were if they hadn't have had like 3 years of sort of buggering around trying to get the thing to work. But actually what was interesting there was that built the community where they could have quite a lot of sort of shocks. I remember in was it last summer, I think, the small love potion, I can't remember, like it 10x, the price of it 10x. It was just because some guys on like it wasn't Reddit, but it was like a Reddit type site, just pumped and dumped it. So literally an external force came in and bought $10 million of it to drive the price up, and then sort of dumped it. Which obviously had a sort of an impact on the game, but because the community had sort of gone along with them so far, and at that stage not that many people were playing it, they could sort of ride it without loss of, at least loss of reputational damage. And I think community in the blockchain does get you not the full way, but gives you a certain amount of latitude to sort of messing around with stuff. And this year where they've changed the breeding price 3 times now to try and change the ratio between small love potion and AXX tokens and all that sort of stuff. They've been able to do that because the community trusts them, and obviously the price is going up. So it's when the price is going down, things are much harder. I mean, I think as you were saying, David, as well, the worst thing is for Axie Infinity's success is now everyone looks at Axie Infinity, and that is now the blueprint. And the one thing I can guarantee is if you copy Axie Infinity, you will not be a success. I mean, that model is gone. I mean, I don't know how much you look at sort of new games coming out. Where do you think? Do you think that I see Axie Infinity as very much like a crypto first game that is in some ways sort of a beautiful Frankensteinian monster. It has the gameplay that Will says is sort of good enough. Has these incredible weird tokens going on. It now has staking. It's going to have governance coming in. All this sort of all the bells and whistles of blockchain. Do we think that is, as blockchain games go more mass market, is it that type of product that is going to get your average Counter-Strike player or your average Call of Duty player into blockchain, or is the next wave we're seeing more like people who've made games before, more like sort of David's experience now coming into play when he can make a game that maybe isn't so blockchain heavy, but maybe is a bit more traditional as a game. I mean, is that the sort of the crossing point we have?
I think the key thing at blockchain games, I always find is a weird way to describe what these are. To me, they're player-owned economies, and I think that not everybody's going to care about governance token trying to influence the direction of the game or trying to make a bit of money that way. I do think that if the main thing for me is a player-owned economy, the idea that you can own something and cash out of the game, and if you do something well that people like, or you're very industrious in the game, then you actually see you benefit financially. Now that I think is something that everybody understands, whether they're everybody's happy to get that close to the game to get to a point where they can actually cash out some money. That seems exciting. In my analogy I've given you before, John, is YouTube, when it started paying its content creators, suddenly a lot of content creators sat up and started really putting effort into they're all day, every day creating content. So I think something similar will happen if you incentivize players financially as well.
So on that basis, I mean, it's a good answer. It didn't answer the sort of question though. I mean, do you think that sort of plays into the strengths of existing sort of games teams? I mean, I guess sort of this week we've seen EA CEOs sort of talk about NFTs. We've seen sort of Take-Two, who've been sort of quite notorious about not liking new tech, talk about, I think, digital assets. They said, EVE Online started minting NFTs in its kind of current tournament. Yeah. Zynga's now got a VP of blockchain gaming. So for up to this point, basically the blockchain, the traditional game world, apart from Ubisoft, maybe has ignored this new technology, and now I wouldn't say they're running wholeheartedly towards it, but they're definitely not ignoring it anymore. So do their advantages now come into play, or is it still?
I think I did this exercise the other day. If you go right back to sort of Amiga PC and then onto console and then onto, look at each generational change up to social games and mobile games, it's a different set of winners each time. It's not the same games and it's not the same companies. It might be the same individuals, but just historically it's never panned out that way, because I think that even though it's people talk about pivoting your company from doing one thing to another, it's an easy sentence to say. It's really hard to do. The culture, the people, you're geared up to do one thing, and there's a real temptation to say, oh well, I can see what's happening in Sorare, so let's just do that with FIFA Ultimate Team and then we'll have a successful blockchain game. It isn't. That's just underestimating the task. So I think that the game skills, like being able to make a fun game, absolutely. But whether or not it comes from the existing game companies, I would think not. We'll see. I think just like Activision bought King and EA bought Glue and etc. I think that it will end up being part of these big game companies at some point, but I don't think it will come from inside it.
You got any views on that, Will?
Yeah, I have a tendency to agree with David. Like, I think that the problem with these big players coming into this space, in the same way that a lot of them have failed in free to play, have really struggled, is that there is a culture that exists within business, like a set of learned knowledge, which all of a sudden now needs to be destroyed, right? Because the reason why this is new and disruptive is because it challenges a fundamental assumption, and the fundamental assumption which is being challenged right now is that the way that you build a game and you profit from it is that you capture players and that you encourage those players to spend, right? In free to play, and in the model prior to that was the idea that you capture player attention and then you force them to spend so they get access to the game, right? So we challenged that assumption. Was like, okay, well, what about actually if we give away a game away for free, the players are in the game, they're enjoying it, and then at that point we ask for money. That seems like a more equitable way of doing it, and all of the stuff there that challenge the assumptions, the way that we've been making games for the last 30 years. The free to play came along, disrupted that, and then this is a new way of thinking that we have to shift those models again. In that, not only are we thinking about, okay, we build this game and it's got to be fun, but we also now need to think about, well, who's participating in this, right? Because it's no longer just players, it's investors, speculators, developers, which are external developers. The idea that we're giving players something that they can then go and is completely out of our control. And I think that the companies that will do best in this space moving forward are the ones that really embrace that decentralization. The ones that are comfortable with being uncomfortable and saying, yeah, this NFT is yours, it's on, and this is something that you can't take a Axie Infinity Axie and play it in another game, right? So that aspect of Axie is not really decentralized, and maybe they're promising that in the future, but you can't take that off of the Ronin chain and start using it in some other game. The companies that will succeed are the ones that have the sort of conviction of vision to say that we need to embrace that decentralization, we need to lose control of aspects of this game, and in losing control of aspects of this game or this company, what we're doing is we're bringing on board new participants, and this becomes an ecosystem. So back in my early 20s, I was really involved in environmental activism, and there was a concept there about permaculture, right? I don't know how much either of you know about permaculture, but the idea is that if you build a garden and you want to keep it under control and you want to grow vegetables, you can spray it with insecticides, right? Or the alternative is that you can find a sort of balance in the ecology where you bring in certain crops which might attract other insects which are going to eat pests, right, for example, and in building that and balancing it over time, that you create this self-sustaining system. And actually what we're looking at here with decentralized games and whatever you want to call it, I like the term crypto games, right, is that you're building that ecosystem, and building that in a way that's self-sustaining is really scary because it's out of your control, even if you retain that element of what you can tweak in and out of it. But those are going to be the companies that succeed, but that's going to be really scary for those people that have got VP positions right now in these businesses where they've profited and been able to maintain their position from a completely different business from what they're applying now. So what you see in those businesses is that those people are there's so much fear about losing their job, right? That they're executing on an existing business model, and so to go out of that and say, right, I'm going to put this idea out here, and it's potentially risky for us because this could fuck up in so many different ways, from a legal, regulatory point of view, and from a financial point of view. It becomes quite scary, and so those businesses don't execute in that way, and it's an oil tanker, right?
Another issue is that the blockchain games don't take 100% of the revenue. So if you're used to taking 100% of your revenue, it's a bold VP that steps up and says, we've got a new idea for a game, but we only take 30% of the revenue. That's now, overall it could make more money, probably will make more money, but it's a long way from what these companies are doing currently.
Yeah,
agree.
No, I absolutely think. I mean, I think that's almost like the biggest challenge for these established companies is, okay, when it comes to the big console games now, to have a few hundred people, maybe even 1,000 people making a game over 3 or 4 years and spending $100 million or something, that is not uncommon now.
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't, blockchain can nowhere near sustain that. I think going back to your point, David, if you look at how a blockchain game sort of probably will work, it will over time it will take the majority of its income from the transactions that people are doing selling these in-game items. So you tend that's sort of stacked towards the long tail or whatever, however you want to sort of term that. So I think these games can be incredibly profitable in the long term because you just keep earning, you keep earning for every transaction as long as you can keep people transacting the NFTs. But in the short term, you're actually in a worse position because your primary sale, your primary sort of revenue in the first year is sort of reduced because you're selling and then these things are getting sold on and you're only getting 5% of the value. So it's actually challenging from a business point of view and then from a sort of cultural point of view, I guess, as Will's been pointing out. That.
Right, and do you think that, have you noticed in games companies that some of the employees just don't like this kind of game? Again, going back to free to play, there's a period of time, John's reacting, where people didn't want to work on free-to-play games because they weren't considered real games. By the way, I made a game called Buzz a while ago. People were telling me that wasn't a real game. So I'm used. There's a lot of gatekeeping that seems to go on in the games industry of people deciding what is and isn't a game.
Yeah, I always think that's a sort of a positive sign that people are telling you it's not a real game. So back when I was sort of running Pocket Gamer on the editorial side, we were a website about free-to-play mobile games. Could we find any journalists who like free-to-play mobile games? I mean, occasionally I could convert one over. I could sort of grab one, kicking and screaming, to take his DS out of his hand and make him play free-to-play mobile games, and you could sort of get them halfway there. But no, I mean, there were in the free-to-play mobile space. There were very few. There was like maybe about 5 of us in the world, I think, who genuinely enjoyed this new type of game. So, I mean, I don't talk to people in traditional games companies anymore. But I think there definitely is, and I guess I'm less concerned than I was. A few months ago, I was quite concerned about a sort of hardcore gaming backlash against this sort of stuff, and I guess it's kind of rightly, we saw concern about sort of ecological issues about blockchains, and I think for some people that will be sort of prevalent. I think probably the industry's done quite a lot to sort of assuage people about that sort of stuff, but the whole kind of I guess we've discussed some of this stuff before. GamesIndustry.biz, a well-known games industry website that took quite a strong stance against NFTs and blockchain. It seems like as the industry's moved towards them, they sort of seem to be nuancing their take on that a little bit, which I think is good. I thought it was a weird decision to make in the first place. But on the other side, I think you have Kotaku. Whenever you think about Kotaku, I would say there's like doubling down on their "we hate NFT" sort of position. And that's fine. I mean, I don't agree with that, but I think people will have that position. And the one I wasn't sure about was Discord. So did you see the Discord stuff this week?
No.
So Jason Citron, the CEO, put out he tweeted on his personal account. It's something like a Discord with some sort of crypto wallet in it or something. And he had to roll back on that pretty quickly. There was an enormous backlash.
Well, but a lot of people using Discord are gamers, and a lot of gamers in the traditional sense don't like free to play, don't like blockchain game. I think blockchain is in a way an exaggerated version of free to play to those people. But also, why do we keep trying to lump them in together? They really serve a different audience anyway, right? The people that are reading Kotaku aren't going to be.
Oh yeah. So
why? Why is it important?
I think what's interesting is that if you, at one level, I think adding you could add NFTs to a game, and they literally all you could be doing is these things that were like in-game badges or something, and now things on a blockchain that you could trade around, or you could set up things where you collect all of them and you get a new one minted to you. I mean, you can do NFTs in a very light level,
right, on
existing games, and then all you're doing effectively is, as you said, player-owned economies. You're giving players some extra stuff in the game. So, I can understand why console gamers don't like free-to-play games, because they're entirely different games. It's an entirely different way of playing a game. I can understand that. The blockchain thing, I think, it annoys me more because I think that's just a presentational issue at the moment, and I think. I think that can change. I don't know whether it will or not. I mean, Will, I guess.
Sorry, I was just going to say that it's frustrating to me when, and I'm speaking about the UK games industry, which I'm part of, where sometimes it pats itself on its back for about Tomb Raider that happened 20 years ago and misses social games, misses free to play. Those went to different parts of the world, and I think we're going to be caught napping here. That's one of my frustrations. Is there's too much discourse about these games, is it ecologically sound, and they're all worth addressing, but all the time we're doing that, we're not really getting a good foothold on what's going to be an enormous industry.
I mean, Will, I see you in my head as a hardcore gamer. I don't know whether that's a justified reputation.
What made you think that?
Yeah, all those Dreamcast games we were looking at before. But I mean, I think you are in a sense, you play these sort of physical card games as well. I mean, games is very much part of your personality in a way that I don't think it is for me. Games have never been sort of central to me in that way. I'm very interested in them, but I think you're a gamer in a way that I'm not. So, can you sort of see that? Can you see why there's this sort of backlash? And I mean, do you think that is just a presentational thing, that over time, when people, to a degree, when people start making money in these things, that sort of goes away?
No, I think it's here to stay. I think this is long term. So part of the UK games industry Slack group, and the rhetoric there is pretty strong, right? And it's to the point where there's been a lot of discourse in the last couple of days about how we handle this discussion. I think up front, we shouldn't dismiss the environmental aspect of this, right? No. Proof of work needs to be kicked out. I think if you are building a game it's a moral imperative that we avoid a proof of work network, right, for building a game. And I feel quite strongly about that.
But you don't have to do that. I mean, the majority of stuff now is not happening on proof of work.
And I think this is exactly the point. Yeah, that when you actually look into it, so on the surface, when you look at what's going on with Ethereum and the pollution from mining, it's serious, right? It's significant, and we shouldn't dismiss that. And but it doesn't dismiss. It misses the point that actually a lot of games are on side chains. They're on alternative networks which use proof of history, proof of authority, etc. And so they actually have an environmental impact which is probably pretty close to traditional servers, right?
Yeah.
Which in itself not great, but still, it's very different from proof of work. So I think that there's an aspect of people that obviously genuinely really worried about this. I don't see that as a culture that was generally worried about the environment anyway. This wasn't, you don't necessarily see these same people that are talking about the problems with proof of work petitioning for people to be vegan, right, for example, right? Which, again, moral imperative, personally, I think that cutting out meat from your diet is a really important part or aspect of us moving towards a zero emissions future, right, which we have to do. So I think it's a little bit of kind of like a way of beating crypto with a shitty stick. And then the sort of second layer of that is it's scams, right? And the fact that rug pulls exist and is a problem. And we have to acknowledge that. Like as an industry, we can't sweep it under the rug. So there are valid concerns here. But
I was going to say rug pulls under the rug. There, that was a meme happening there. It's like infinite recursive rugs.
It's a fold. It's a rug fold. So you pull the rug and tuck it underneath the rug. And yeah, exactly. So all of this, right, that side, right, we've got some issues that we need to sort out. We need to make sure our house is in order. But I think it's a little bit of kind of like to some degree for some people is a way of beating crypto with a shitty stick. Yeah. And this kind of comes from a little bit of privilege, I think. And I think a lot of gamers come from a middle class background. This is three middle class white guys, right? Like, let's be honest. Yeah. But I think that there's an aspect of that they come from a certain background where they had access to games. They were able to step into the games industry. They could buy games up front. It was never a problem for them. And the thing that free-to-play has done, which it doesn't get the credit for enough, is that we've moved from 100 million Wii consoles, right, at the peak of the Wii, which was considered this broadening of demographics, and brought it into the home, and it was Nan's first game, to all of a sudden now we've got 3 billion players on mobile free-to-play, right? That's huge. And they're not just in Western countries, right? These are in emerging markets. We're seeing, India has a huge uptake in mobile gaming. Parts of Asia, Africa, right? And this is huge. This is like the cultural progress of games through mobile free-to-play is massive, and it's the single thing which is broadened participation and inclusion, and we should acknowledge that and embrace it. But there's a fight against it because I think that people want games to be what it always was, and particularly this comes a lot from the indie scene, where what you see is a business model and a type of of development process, which is really similar to all the games that were behind me, right? In that you pay up front for it, and it's a small team that builds it, and that's kind of how they envision games are, and the way that they should always be into the future. Whereas free to play says, to some degree, actually, no, we're going to give this to access to people that can't afford this, and we're going to democratize the payment systems. And I think crypto then goes one step further, and then it says we're going to democratize the development process, and we're going to expand this participation even further again. And that's really scary for people that don't want games to be co-opted or changed. And I think it would be the tactics are nowhere near what happened with Gamergate, but I think there's a similar motivation here, right? Which is the feeling of games changing and progression, and a fear of that. And it's understandable, right? Like there's a thing that you like, and it's a big part of who you are and your personality, and embracing that. And I hope that what can happen is that we do move to a point where games are games, right? And if you enjoy, I love free to play games, I love crypto games. Obviously, into the future, I love playing all of these games behind me. They're not just backdrop. I play card games. I play Magic the Gathering competitively, right? There's so many fantastic experiences in games, and if we can get over the medium or the monetization mechanisms, the business models behind that, and we can just kind of like free ourselves. There's so much to enjoy.
You're positive, very good. Will like that. we could have that as our ending note, but we're not. I also have sort of one more question, so we have to go back in. maybe it's going to go all horribly wrong, but it's always sort of good to look forward. As much as no one knows what's sort of going on, but 2021 has been pretty sort of explosive, for the whole kind of sector, and very, I think, interesting, because there's lots of people are now interested, and there's no sort of real consensus about what's happening. So there's lots of experimentation, lots of money obviously coming in, lots of investment money coming in. How do we see, given that backdrop, how do we see 2022 as playing out? So my view is sort of blockchain tends to go, nothing happens, and then it's sort of explosive for a bit, and then it sort of collapses again, and then it tends to go on those sort of weird sort of punctuated sort of cycles. So there's a lot of games coming out, which is always interesting, because there's not actually really that many blockchain games, I think, that are at a state of people actually playing and enjoying. So for me, like personally, I'm kind of excited at some of these games actually coming out, even though most of them I don't think will fulfil their sort of potential. I mean, how do you see it playing out, sort of, David? Is it just going to continue? Are we still in this sort of whatever bubble, upward rise, it's going to, we've got a bit more to go on that?
Well, you mentioned that there's a lot of money coming in, and sometimes how these industry trends happen is, like if you were pitching to a venture capitalist to make a mobile studio, you're not going to get the money, or PC games, or console games. That's not what VCs, at least, I know that's not the only investment option. So there's quite a lot of people that are making blockchain games now, I think, because that's one of the things that they can get investment for. So I think that you will see a lot of games. I think some of them will be more, games with NFT bolted on rather than genuine blockchain games playing around economies. So I think we'll see a lot of that. I also wonder, and I'm not an expert on this, but people that I speak to that are talk about what happens in a crypto winter. So if next year prices go down on crypto, then presumably that play to earn component becomes works less well, and maybe that's a time where people just get their head down and build for the next when things go up again. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, do you think will Axie Infinity obviously still be there? Do you think we'll see games that are approaching that sort of economic and kind of audience sort of level? Do you think that's sort of inevitable, or this time next year will we go? Well, obviously no one was going to get anywhere close to Axie. Axie is just this phenomenon, and everything else was a bit.
I mean, there'll be loads like that.
You think? But at that sort of size?
Yeah, I think there's going to be other billion-dollar games next year in terms of revenue. I think that's one game type of many. It's clearly popular to play, and the play to earn aspect of it's super popular with maybe a different set of people. So I think you'll see other games with million DAU and billion-dollar revenue, of which, and that billion-dollar revenue might not all go to the game maker, but that's being raised overall.
Positive, good. Will, how do you see it playing out?
I mean, I hope that the investment continues into next year for quite selfish reasons. I think that in terms of like the game aspect of this, so I think that I'm less interested in the games that are coming out next, as I am the systems or the mechanics which will emerge. When I talk to lots of people in this space, the thing that's actually interesting, the thing which is genuinely new, is the interoperability of assets, right? And I think that there are big design and technical issues to solve with that. And when I talk to people, that's where their heads are at naturally, I think. So the thing that I'm interested in is like what happens when somebody's minting cars and then 3 other games are using those cars in their game, and then there's a smart contract, built by someone in Africa which is burning those cars and turning them into dragons for their dungeon crawler. And like all of this stuff starts to work in ways which we never anticipated, like that. And let's forget like gas fees or whatever, right, which are kind of currently crippling a lot of this more interesting aspects to happen. Like, let's assume that technically gets solved and we're all on Solana or whatever. This is where the stuff gets interesting for me, right? Like Axie Infinity is like the Farmville moment, right? All of a sudden you have a breakout game and it kind of sets a little bit of a model and everybody's looking at it and everyone's like, okay, in Farmville everybody was like, it's timers, right? Everything needs to have a timer on it. And I think that probably a lot of people are going to be looking at Axie and doing the surface level look at it and going, that's what it is. But where this gets interesting for me is like when we start to break out and we start doing the stuff which is much more interesting, which is not just games. And so the stuff I'm looking forward to is like people doing weird shit. Like David said, right? They're at the weird end of stuff. Like, how weird does it get? I want to see some people doing some really weird stuff with this.
So that interoperability, which I think is called composability on Web3, is that right?
Oh, David, very good.
Yeah,
right, got the lingo down.
Yeah, there we are. So one of the reasons why I like Loot as an NFT and an idea is because it starts with the game component and then can be used in a number of games. And the idea that you start with a game element rather than start with a game, I think, is amazing and completely unexplored. Nobody's ever done that before. And so I love your example, Will, where you can use you get a car NFT that you've bought. I don't know where you buy it from, but you buy a car NFT that then can be used in these different games. And at first I thought, well, why would any game bother to take your car NFT? And then you realise that that's a great way of building an audience. If you say, hey, your car's going to work fine in our game, then automatically you'll start getting, maybe that's what marketing looks like, or maybe that's an important part of marketing.
How about this, David? Like, my founders might kill me for this, but what about if there was an idea where not only can you use them, but you're profiting from them?
Perfect.
There's some tokenomics behind that, which allows you to actually now start benefiting financially from those assets that you're... Bit of an interesting thought experiment.
Wow. Well, that's the point, isn't it? Right. So when you talk about being more interested in the technology behind it, for me, it's the new ideas that you can now add into your games. And like we've seen 10% of them in blockchain so far. Not even. Who knows? There's just loads more. And every time I'm in the office, I hope you'll find this too, I speak to people and we say, we could do that, couldn't we? Wouldn't that work? Nobody's ever done that before. I wonder if it would be popular. It's much more fun making those kind of games than just trying to increase the art DAO up by a cent,
Definitely. And there was so this is something that we chose not to pursue, but one idea that I had early on, I'm throwing this out there because I hope somebody does it. I don't know how much you know about the Once Upon a Time in Shaolin album by Wu-Tang. Imagine if that existed as a game, and this is something I've been kicking around in my head for a long time, which was the idea of, well, you put this thing on a disc, right? You make a game, you make one copy of it, you put it on a disc, and you send it out to someone, right? You sell it. What if that was then an NFT? And so one of the ideas that we kicked around was imagine like a Pico 8 or some sort of like virtual console that you build a game. There's only one copy of it, and it has a unique hash, and then you encrypt it, and only one person can have it, right? And so that you can only play it then on that Pico 8 console. And what happens then if you have the ability to like rent that out? So I can rent this. So David, imagine that Elon Musk makes a game on this virtual console, and then David, you go and buy it, and I'm like, okay, I'll rent it for you for $100 an hour, right? And you could stream it and you could record videos of it, but you could be the only person in the world that will play it, and only ever one person at one moment. I'd love for that to happen. I think that's a really unique use of blockchain, where it's verifiable and public, and be fantastic.
Wasn't it a DAO that ended up buying that album anyway?
It was, Please a DAO,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I wonder if that would be a good way of them recouping, wouldn't it? The rent out listens or something, maybe.
That's what they're doing. I think they're taking it on tour.
Is that what, there you go.
But similar to an NFT, they don't own the works, right? Like that,
Right.
that remains with the Wu-Tang
Well,
Clan.
you know, I've been looking into this lately, and that's just a T's and C's thing. So I think what CryptoPunks or maybe Bored Apes, that you actually have the copyright gets transferred along with the NFT. My point is that you can decide that as a content creator.
Yeah, you can do. Yeah, I think in the instance of Wu-Tang, that they kept the rights in it. I think it was contractually you couldn't reproduce this thing and start release it as your own album. Be a cheap way to like buy a Wu-Tang album, I'd imagine.
True enough.
Good. Well, as I think you can see, we could be talking for a few more hours, but I think we'll spare the audience, who some of whom will be completists and want to get through to the end. So, just to say thank you very much, Will and David, for being on episode 100, and I guess we're just scratching the surface of where this sort of stuff is going. I think really good conversation with two very bright minds in this space.
Hey, John.
I'm learning stuff. So,
by the way, congratulate. I remember 4 years ago when you started doing this, and go, what on earth is John doing?
He's gone mad. He's lost it. What's he doing?
What is this? Let's have a look at these games. Oh, they're terrible. John, come back. And now it turned out that you were quite prescient. So, well done on that. Well done for getting to 100 podcasts. Eh?
Well, thank you very much. That's I don't know how I got. I guess precedence is something sort of it sort of happens, and it's sort of great when something you sort of promoting sort of happens. But I was promoting it not because I necessarily thought it was going to happen. I was just so interested in it. I think. I mean, I didn't necessarily expect it to be the success that it is, but I guess in our own individual ways, when the light goes on with blockchain, I think for whatever reason, that you just get a bit consumed by it. And
well, you also get a bit evangelical,
yeah.
And I have to check myself a bit, because I will talk until people tell me to stop about this. Because once you're in there and there's so many things to talk about that haven't been done before, and in games but outside of games, and it's hard to stop, which is why this is running on, isn't it?
Okay. But no, this is the passion of the thing, that there's so many. I mean, just even there, with you guys just sort of riffing up of what can happen. I mean, there's just so much sort of blank space to be written. I mean, it's not just like a 5-year thing, and not even probably a 10-year thing. It's like a 20-year reinvention. And
it's the rest of our careers.
You mentioned DAOs. I think DAOs are super fascinating. I mean, DAOs are but that'll be issue 200. We'll come back and see where we are.
If you can't get the big guys by then, we can come back and do,
we'll
do 200.
What a slur at the beginning. Don't start a podcast saying I couldn't get the big names, but here's David and Will.
I thought it'd be funny. It was a joke. Come on. I know you well enough. Okay, let's leave it for the whole thing before I lose my friends. Thank you very much for listening and watching the podcast videocast. Please subscribe via the usual channels every week or so. We are talking to the people who are building this crazy world, and in fact, I can guarantee. Normally, I say every week. I do have next week's one already done, so next week's will be happening in a week's time. So there we go. Please do subscribe. But thanks for watching and listening, and see you again soon.